It's about 10:15 on Wednesday, the 28th of April. This is going to be what I would call your bedtime forecast, because I think after the excitement we had earlier this evening, probably a good idea to give everybody a reset on what we can expect during overnight hours. First and foremost, I would say that you should be able to get a fair amount of sleep. I think it depends on whether you're a light sleeper or a heavy sleeper, but I think between the two of those things, you should be able to get some amount of sleep. But I kind of want to give you a big picture on what we can expect going forward. So as you can see from the current radar screen here, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there are no current watches or warnings. There's a watch. I'll talk about that in a second. No warnings. The thunderstorm that unfortunately caused all the havoc in North Tarrant County and southeastern Denton County and just about till it got to Collin County, and luckily it kind of started to wind down a little bit. Unfortunately, a lot of reports of large hail there. I'm sure you saw some pictures on the local TV stations. I'm sure. Unfortunately, some baseball-sized hail, some car windows busted out. Very unfortunate. It does look like that was a rather small area, relatively speaking. Of course, if you're, as I said earlier, if you're under that, it doesn't give you a lot of solace. But the biggest of the hail wasn't as widespread as as it looks. So that's good. Okay, with all that being said, let's talk about what we can expect tonight. So you've got the current radar up here, and again, pointing out a couple of things. This, of course, is the storm that caused all the trouble. It's about to cross into southeastern Grayson County. Non-severe at this point, so hopefully it stays that way. Excuse me. And let's broaden this view out here a little bit. Okay, so this is really what we should talk about going into the overnight hours, and we're going to put this in motion here. And so, as you can see, we still have storm formation out to the west of us, heading our direction. It is, at least at this point, it is nothing on the magnitude of what we saw earlier this evening, thankfully. And as we get into nightfall, we tend, not always, we tend to see the atmosphere stabilize a little bit, and that does help our storm intensity. It doesn't mean you can't get a hailer, as we call it, during the middle of the night, because you certainly can, but typically it's not the size hail we see that we saw earlier today. But again, that's this, we just got to watch that. The one thing I will say is that, the storms that went through our area north of us, north of Dallas-Fort Worth proper, did tend to stabilize the atmosphere, at least temporarily. So that's good. So the storms that are moving in from the west should be, looking at the models and how it's projecting out, I think they not that they couldn't be severe. I wouldn't be shocked at all if we had a severe thunderstorm warning overnight. But hopefully these will be more of rain producers than severe weather producers. And I think you're starting to see that with the radar presentation right now. And so let's focus on that. So let's stop this and zoom in a little bit on some of these storms. Now, I will say, if I can get my radar to move here. Okay, I think I'll do it just a second. These storms down here, this is Comanche. You see severe thunderstorm warnings in effect for those guys. And there is some hail and some wind with those storms. So they're a little bit on, oh, you know what? You can't see that. I apologize. Let me see if I can move this. There we go. Okay, yeah, my big head's in the way. Okay, so there are severe thunderstorm warnings for these storms, and you can kind of get an idea of why if you take the storms, definitely showing a Boeing type structure. So there are some pretty heavy winds. I think they had a couple measurements of 70 miles an hour. And again, for reference, Dallas, Fort Worth. And if we put this in motion, these storms, these nastier storms, should stay south of Dallas-Fort Worth proper. However, you can see, as we talked about all night, the general motion of storms is to the northeast. But these storms in particular are wanting to move more east, maybe east-northeast. So something, right now I wouldn't say it's something to be terribly alarmed about, but it's probably going to be a little too close for comfort, if you will. But again, the atmosphere over Dallas-Fort Worth is a little more stable than it was, so that should help. So let's stop this here. So again, if you pull up the particulars on some of these storms, 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts and quarter-size hail. So that's actually come down some. These storms earlier were producing golf ball-size hail, so that's actually a good sign. So I think overnight, if we were to see the definition of severe weather from a wind standpoint, I think that's what it might be issued for more than hail. Not that that's great, but I have to admit I'll take my chances with wind as opposed to hail, especially if it's a non-tornadic wind. So the other thing I would point out too is you see this you see this line of storms off to our northwest. And if I can get this tool to work, maybe. Okay, I'll try it one more time. Oh my gosh, it's getting late. Anyway, you get the idea. So you see this line of storms and heading our way in a general sense, moving, again, this general motion of east-northeast. And so, again, that's what we can expect overnight. We're going to see some storms. If you're a light sleeper, or maybe if you're even a heavy sleeper, you're probably going to get woken up. I don't think it's anything that is to be terribly alarmed about. Now, this is Texas, so things can change pretty quick. But I think overall, though, it's going to stay. If we do see some quote unquote severe weather, I think it'll be at a minimum from a severe weather criteria standpoint. But it's just unfortunately we just can't rule it out altogether. And so let me move this frame here. So again, if you look out here to the west, you don't see any yellow boxes. So yellow polygons are severe thunderstorm warnings, so you don't see that. So that's good. Hopefully it stays that way. But I think we are going to see some rain overnight with storms. So I think in a general sense, you might call it stormy weather. I don't know about you, but I'll take stormy weather because that's a lot better than the weather we saw earlier today. So with that, let me refresh the graphics for you. So just as a reminder, we do still have a tornado watch in effect for our area until 2 a.m. tomorrow morning, because you just can't rule out the fact that these storms wouldn't spin up a tornado. I think you saw a good example of that spin up earlier. I'm thinking again, the way the atmosphere typically works is the atmosphere would be a little more stable overnight. So I hope we don't see a lot of that, but we could. The atmosphere is definitely capable of that. Excuse me. Hail, we could see some hail. Again, I don't think it's going to be anything like we saw earlier, but there's still a possibility. And then I think that and wind gust up to 70 miles an hour, technically, I don't think we'll see it that big here. But again, I think out of the three, tornadoes, hail, and wind, I think that wind would be our biggest threat overnight from a severe weather standpoint. Hopefully not, but I think that might be what you're looking at. So let's put this radar. And let me do one more graphic here. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of a timeline from now overnight. This is something that the National Weather Service put together. So again, I think our biggest threat, you see all the threats up there in the top left. I think the biggest threat is damaging wind gusts. But again, on this evening, the upper right, it's kind of where we're at right now. Definitely have a chance to see strong to severe thunderstorms. And then I'm blocking it a little bit, but overnight, you see the strong storms. I think you'll definitely see that. Like I said, stormy is probably a good way to put it. Maybe some small hail, gusty winds. Let's hope that's all it is. And then toward the morning hours, I think if this evolves like we think, it'll definitely be a heavy rain event. Technically we're under a flash flood watch, so I think that would out of all this, I think that would definitely be good news to get some rain out of this. That's for sure. So that's kind of a timeline from what we can expect. Let's go back to the radar here before we wrap it up, and let's put this in motion one more time so you can get an idea. Again, you can see the evolution of the storm. Then when it was over northern Tarrant County and moved on up into Collin County, and it's non-severe at the moment. But again, I would focus your attention on really two areas that I think are ultimately going to merge, and I think you're starting to see that. So there's two areas that we want to watch out for, and let's expand this out. Well, let's go the other way. There we go. Okay. All this bandwidth. So again, two areas to watch. One, you see this line of storms here. It's not anything horrible, so that's good. So that's one area to watch out for overnight. And then the other area, which is a little more problematic because we have some severe thunderstorm warnings for these storms, is these storms that are southwest of Dallas-Fort Worth that want to move a little bit more east-northeast. So we'll put that in motion And like I said, I think the vast majority of those storms will stay south of DFW proper, but just again, something to watch. Now it's 10:25 now. I can promise you that I love watching the weather, but I'm not going to stay up for those storms. So let's put it that way. So if that helps you feel better, hopefully that will help. But again, if it's something that I feel like that needs attention in the overnight hours, I will definitely give that to you. Hopefully not. Let's just be honest. Hopefully it's just stormy and it's nothing to really get too excited about. Okay, so that's the radar as we see it at 10:25 on Wednesday, April 28th. Thank you for your comments in the chat. I appreciate that. And Linda, thank you. Paula, Beverly, Lori, Chris, Angela. Yeah, we've talked a lot tonight, Angela. and Angela's a dear friend of mine. Went to high school with her husband. And unfortunately, they were in the Trophy Club area. I think they escaped the worst of it, but they did have some hail, but they're okay, so that's good to know. I talked to several of my friends that live over in that part of the neck of the woods, and thankfully they're okay. Didn't hear about any damage with those guys, so appreciate that. Like I said in the very beginning, unfortunately, a lot of people did have damage, and that's unfortunate. Penny, thank you. Amy, thank you. Nancy, she's in Oklahoma. Yeah, she's used to all this. Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate it, Amanda. Thank you. I appreciate you watching. And so again, I'll end with this. Again, if you're following me, if you're listening to this on Facebook, that's great. But if for whatever reason Facebook's not your thing, then I do this live on my Twitter account at Jeff Bickerstaff. It's live on my YouTube page. That's just YouTube search Jeff Bickerstaff, and all my weather videos are on there. And then the newest addition to my streaming platform is Twitch, and my screen name for Twitch is AggieMan91. And if you don't know what that means, just you ask somebody, you'll get the idea why I came up with that name. But Twitch is a new platform. It's more of a gaming platform, but I've had some requests to broadcast on that, so I'll definitely do that. Well, again, thank you everyone for watching. I hope that this is the last of the excitement that we have. I hope it's just more of a rainstorming event overnight. I think it will be, but again, this is Texas. It could change, and if it does change, I will definitely be back on, whether it's a post or if it's let's hope not. Let's hope it doesn't require a live feed. Angela, you're on Twitch. Yeah, question mark. Do you know how old you are? You're only as old as you feel. So I'll just leave it at that. Well, as always, I'm watching the weather so you don't have to. Hope everyone has a great evening. What's left of. I hope you have sweet dreams, all that good stuff, a good night's sleep. And then it is severe weather season, and it's unfortunately we'll probably be doing this again next week. So just stay tuned for that. But again, thank you for watching, everybody. I appreciate it. Have a good evening, good night, and we will talk to you soon.